here with Marc Anthony Stainisz and James Rigato, and we're going to talk a little bit of Bezerkers. Hey, Marc.
Hello, Erin. It's okay.
All right. Let's just jump right into it. You guys talk to me a little bit about how this project came to be.
Yeah, I'll start. So yeah, this is obviously a project Marc Anthony and I have been talking about for a little while. Do I sound funny to you? Can you hear me all right? Good. So yeah, we've been working on this project for a little while. This is a band that I'm obviously a big fan of and named the restaurant after. And I got Marc Anthony involved, and we went out to Rhode Island and threw this crazy idea at Morgan Eve, and she luckily said, yeah, you come on in and film parts of my life, learn all about the things you didn't know.
And, what was your relationship with Morgan Eve before you made this film?
I didn't know Morgan Eve at all. I had seen her in concert a few times, but we had never actually talked or really interacted at all. I only knew her, as a fan of her band.
Here I am. What was her involvement over the course of the filmmaking? Was she in there all the time, or did you just go to her at certain points? What was the relationship like there?
Yeah, so we basically, we flew to Rhode Island and had little planned. I said, Marc Anthony, pack a camera. We're going to try to capture some of this content and see if she's interested in letting us invade this part of her life for this film. And we basically sat down at dinner and went over all the worries and the concerns that you would imagine having with strangers who want to barge into your life. And she was incredibly sweet and gracious. And, I think after a couple of drinks and a nice meal, I just, basically said, hey, I love your band. I respect what you do. Everything we make, you'll have full right of refusal for. And she pretty much, signed on there. And we would keep her in the loop on filming and kind of show her pieces of it. But really, it was a love letter from me to the band. So I didn't want to give her so many details that she lost the magic, I think, of the finished product. Not that she would, but, I wanted it to be a surprise as much as I could while still involving her. So I think we got to a point where she trusted us. And then we kind of went silent for, I feel like months, maybe 2 or 3 months. And then showed her what our almost final edit was.
And how did things evolve from your initial idea of what this film could potentially be to where you ended up with the final edit?
With Marc Anthony, he's basically a commissioned filmmaker for me. So the band is obviously my big interest. I loved the band. I was a huge fan. And I introduced him to Marc Anthony and was like, hey, listen to these guys. And he's like, oh, wow, this is great music, but this is not something that I would listen to on a regular basis. And that was kind of it was good for me. I was like, I don't want to have 2 fans just geeking out over a band. I want to have an artist who has an eye for film. So when I reached out to Marc Anthony and said, you're the perfect one, but let's do this. I think that he appreciated the challenge of capturing this content, not through my lens as a fan, but more as a filmmaker. So Marc Anthony, why don't you chime in?
Yeah, what do you want me to chime in on specifically?
Well, tell us a little bit about your background as a filmmaker and, how this fits into things you've done in the past or doesn't fit in.
Yeah, so I come into filmmaking more like an experimental side. And so that was kind of how I fell into this project with Chef James, was the fact that I made a film called Psyches, which was an experimental documentary, explored 3 different artists across different mediums, all ranging in age and capturing more of their spirit, a little bit of their story, but more about the spirit of them. And Chef James saw that and felt like it was a natural transition into the story that he had in his head, this rough idea that he had. So it was a real challenge for me because, again, more of a storyline, and especially for this story, which is huge. It's just like there's Chef James and Morgan Eve and Dave Lamb, and their stories and their energy is just like massive. So it was a challenge to try to find something that was contained within a short film that also gives you the interest and the excitement to find out more about them and to keep on creating.
Yeah, you have a pretty good amount of archival footage in here as well. Where did that come from? And how did you find it?
The archival footage of Brown Bird was just from all online resources, something that their friends had captured, news, just like again live captures of their concerts as well. So it was more of like how can I sum up their journeys as a band kind of within 20 seconds, and I just had to pull from all these different timelines in order to show their love and like what they create together, but also at the same time span the cost of whatever amount of years that they had together.
Well, that's an interesting point too, Marc Anthony, because I've seen the band live 3 separate times, and as their albums would come out, their sound and their energy and the different instruments they'd play would change. So it's one of those bands that if you saw them in the spring, by the fall they're a whole new band, and that was pretty exciting. And I think as a filmmaker trying to capture that and bundle it, I think that 3 big personalities is a good description, because that was probably Marc Anthony's biggest challenge was like capturing all, how do you edit and put all this stuff into this little shoebox? You want to move your house and you want to fit it in a shoebox. It's kind of, I think, watching the challenge that I put on him.
How did you land on the length of the film? Do you have a longer cut out there somewhere, or is this just where the content took you?
Marc Anthony?
Yeah. We have, even within that 3 days and those little events that we had filmed, there's so much that was not within the film. And again, with James just coming up with this this short concept and not really fully formed, I think that allowed us to just throw everything out there of what we captured, and it go to 37 minutes and then back down to 8, and they fluctuated so much to the fact where it's just it had to feel natural. I think the whole process was everything had to be refined until it felt natural. So that's how it just ended up. It was just it felt natural. We sent it out to Morgan Eve and she gave us her blessing, and that was it.
Yeah, I think one thing too, Erin, we sent out the pretty much finished version to probably too many people, for feedback. And, that was something I think it was a little bit overwhelming, especially with Marc Anthony, because he's actually editing so much. And I would, we'd ask somebody, we'd get their opinions, and I'd ask 10 different people and get 10 different answers, but we could kind of cherry pick the little feedback that we wanted. And we got some really great, structural feedback. I mean, Andalisi gave us some really brilliant feedback. Curly Anchik did. So there were some good other creators that would chime in. And I think that's the perk, is you can kind of take what you like and put it in motion, or, say thank you, but we're going to go in a different direction. So yeah, I think that once we really got some trusted feedback, we felt comfortable with the time slot.
What was it like being sort of on the other side of the camera for you, James? I mean, you've done Dinner in Abruzzo, but you weren't really the filmmaker there. Sounds like you were in the editing room a lot with this one. How does it even work practically when you've got a pretty demanding day job?
Yeah, Marc Anthony was working at Mabel at the time that we were filming this, and basically it would be, talking about it before service, talking about it after service. He'd go home, edit till 2, 3 in the morning, send me a final version. If I was still awake, I'd watch it, feed, comment back, and I mean, I can't imagine the man hours that he actually spent, hunched over a computer editing this. I mean, I know I can say at least 10 different versions that we watched, and in different juxtaposition of do we hold off talk to, we didn't want people to focus on Dave being, gone, as, we didn't know where to put that. Like, obviously I didn't want it to be like, if you research it, it's easy to find out that Morgan Eve is now, a solo, artist, and Brown Bird is disbanded and Dave passed away. And, but I didn't know, we didn't quite know how to narrate that out of the gate. So once we kind of like got more of the story, got the Willis Show Bar, and really got some music, where are we going to put certain songs? I think that's something we didn't discuss, Marc Anthony and I, directly, but like where we put the music really helped, shape out the film. And I think that's something that Marc Anthony did a really great job with. Like, this song goes here, this song goes there. I think I wanted to end it on more of an intense one of their songs. He picked that's the softer one you kind of heard. And so he had kind of put his foot down a few times about structure, that it really benefited the film. But I think that, like he said, I was really trying to cram so many ideas in the shoebox. I'm super happy with it, but there's still so many. It's could have been a 4-hour film. You got to draw a line somewhere.
Yeah, that actually takes us into our first audience question, which is, where does the title come from?
Oh, good one. That's so Bezerkers is a line actually in the song Mabel Gray, and he says, "We are still the same crew of Bezerkers that you knew, but maybe just a little more strange." And it's a reference that Morgan Eve enjoys for thinking about what a band is like when you got a band of Bezerkers, and it's kind of appropriate for restaurants too. Restaurants are kind of like crazy pirate ships, and Bezerkers are kind of like wildly eccentric, creative, kind of energetic, beings. So Morgan Eve mentioned that Dave always referred to musicians and kind of bands as Bezerkers. So we felt like it was appropriate. Yeah, great question. But it's actually from the song Mabel Gray.
Okay. Why don't you give us a little background into how you actually discovered Brown Bird? Because that's not really covered in the film.
Yeah, sure.
Given that you love them.
So I have a friend, actually, a poet, Katie Shabilsky, in New York City, and I pretty much read every. She went to Pratt, so I would read every book that she was reading, and I kind of got like a degree in osmosis. I say associates in poetry through osmosis and whatever she was doing. So, but anything Katie ever sends me with poetry or music or books, I always grab on. And one night she texted me and was like, "Dude, I'm at this bar and this band Brown Bird. You got to look them up. They're incredible." And I did, and pretty much immediately, I kind of became a fan of the band right around the same time that Morgan Eve joined the band. So it was pretty cool to watch her grow as an artist, because we kind of checked in at the same time, about 2000, I feel like 2010, maybe 9, and then I opened up The Root in 2011, and then she kind of switched into Huntress and Hold Their Hands in 2015 when Mabel opened, and so it was kind of cool to I feel grow up a little bit with Morgan Eve, and then obviously meet her for this film. But yeah, so I had a friend in New York City who was at a tiny little bar and saw them playing.
So if Morgan Eve moves on to something else, what does that mean you're going to be doing?
Yeah, good question. Well, we're both currently quarantined, so we're still in harmony. But I think that music is a very important part of many people's lives, and we listen. I mean, as people, I know you're a big fan of music, Erin, and a lot of our customers are. People comment on our playlists, sometimes negatively and sometimes positively at the restaurant. And people love music. It's a language. It's an art form, and I think that I will continue to be inspired by Morgan Eve, but also all the music that I listen to. I think a lot of chefs bring music into their inspiration, and this is just a much more intense version of it. But I think it's pretty common for people to have cooking and music go hand in hand.
Yeah. Marc Anthony, what's your next project? Do you have anything on the books besides hanging out in your house?
Actually, this is a very fruitful time for ideas. I actually, I got inspired by Chef James's approach to filmmaking and producing all of this, that I kind of want to take a little step back from directing and go into more of a producer route in terms of different ideas and compiling creators in order to execute the ideas based on innovation and form and delivery and experimentation too. So that's what's going up on my alley. So yeah.
I think last question, you talked to us a little bit. You mentioned the final song in the film that you guys had a bit of a disagreement about what it was going to be. But the one that you did land on, talk to me a little bit about, where is that one of those two songs that she was talking about Dave pulling out of her? It was, it felt like a very meaningful, relationship song, put it that way.
So yeah, so no, the final song is actually a Brown Bird song, and then Morgan Eve's music is as a solo creator, she does have a band. It's called Huntress and Holder of Hands. So I think if you go on to Spotify or Apple and you check out Huntress and Holder of Hands, they only have one album, Avalon, and that was a lot of the content there is inspired by making music immediately in the wake of losing your partner. The album, that album's very it's very intense. I think like when you listen to it at first, it's almost like you have to kind of like prepare yourself for that tone. But that's a lot of music she was playing live at Willis, and that was a room full of strangers that we're not aware of that band. And when you see it live, every album that she's been a part of really has its own kind of tone and personality. So it's kind of exciting to dig in because it's not a one-trick pony. You really can you should do a little bit of research about what you're feeling, because some of those albums are incredibly, powerful. For instance, the song Severed Soul is a song that she wrote for Dave when they early in their relationship. And it's about what would happen, how devastated she would be if she were to lose him. And then, here we go in the future, I think maybe 5 years into the future, not even, she loses him. And she revisits that song with her new band too. And it's a little bit of a slower, more intense version. And, things like that, just like it's hard to even talk about it because it's so emotional, but there's songs like that when you sit down and listen to it and you put yourself, from her perspective, it's incredibly, it's just, I feel so connected to the human emotion through music, and like songs like that really explain more than words can.
By the way, I think your voiceover was the quietest I've ever heard you be.
yeah, that's fair. yeah, exactly. When you're alone in a studio with a microphone and you're in your headphones, you're a little quieter than you expect.
Yeah. Did anybody give you notes on that?
Yeah, no, like I said, we used Chris Stales and Elise's husband actually at Studios in the Pond, who did our sound work, and that's one of my favorite parts of the film is the sound work, because we love that music. And so, like, to be able to hear it is just, to hear it with such crisp quality. To me, that's what makes a film.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for us. Thank you, gentlemen, for talking with me. And everybody, get ready for Pie and the Puss, directed by Stacey Davis, about one of my favorite topics, throwing pies in people's faces. Thanks for joining us.